Yeah. All right, good morning. We will get our Board of Commissioners meeting started for Tuesday, July 18th. We'll start with introductions. In the room, I'm Pat Malone, Commissioner.
Good morning, Zan Ojiro, Commissioner.
Suzanne Hoffman, Interim County Administrator.
And in the room,
Hi, April Holland, Interim Health Department Director.
morning.
Morning, Tom Fortier.
Morning.
Maggie. Gloria Campster, Albany.
Tom Martin, County Superior. Jesse Ott, Deputy Director.
Tom Douglas, Executive Director, National Areas.
Corey Roden, Public Information.
Erica Milo, Board Recorder.
Thank you. Is there anybody joining us online this morning?
Joby Lewis, Community Development.
Apparently not. So next up, are there any announcements? I will speak up a little bit louder. Is that better? I will do my best. Okay. Is there anybody online that would like to introduce themselves? And we're also doing a sound check to make sure you can hear us in the room.
Joby Lewis, Community Development.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. This is Darren Nichols, Community Development Director.
Our AV equipment is fairly new. We're still getting some of the bugs worked out. Darren, if you can hear us, would you introduce yourself?
Good morning, Commissioners. This is Darren Nichols, Community Development.
Darren, can you hear us? And if you can, would you please introduce yourself?
Good morning, Commissioners. This is Darren Nichols, Community Development.
Thank you. I think that means everything is working like it. John, are we good to go? Great. All right. Next up is review and approve our agenda. Are there any additions or corrections? It's not a addition, but at the end of our regular meeting, we will have an executive session. All right, next up is comments from the public. First up is Mei Yi. Would you come up to the table?
Good morning, Chair Malone and Commissioners Origold. For the record, my name is Mei Yi, retired Oregon State Senator. My address is 34465 Yi Lane, Northeast Albany, Oregon. I'm here to present research information that might be useful in your decisions regarding the burial of public waste for the Republic Waste Disposal Service in Corvallis. This information is a result of an essay contest I have sponsored every year since 2009 for Albany High School senior students. The purpose of the contest is to encourage the study of science and critical thinking. Essay topics have ranged from the uses of rare metals, energy independence, nuclear energy, and many others. In 2022, the essay contest topic was a plan for sufficient energy for the nation as we move forward, replacing fossil fuel with renewable and other sources. The new technologies recommended by Spencer Metzen, the essay winner, could be useful for your consideration. I encourage Spencer to present his essay to you, but due to a family vacation conflict, he is not able to attend. I am now presenting the essay to you so that you can consider the new technologies stated in the essay as you make your long-term policy decision. The new technologies include recycling of plastic bags to hydrogen gas, storage of solar and wind energy, and converting waste to energy, such as being accomplished at a facility in Brooks, Oregon. In view of all the oppositions you have received during the past year in further expansion of land use for burial of public waste, I, as a concerned citizen, believe it is important to present the essay and research information for your study and consideration. Should you or your staff have questions, I would urge you to contact Spencer or Dr. David Allman, Assistant Director for Materials Engineering and Manufacturing at the National Energy Technology Laboratory in Albany, who serve as a judge for the essay contest. Thank you for your time and attention. I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have. I would also appreciate hearing from you when you make your decisions. I'm submitting here with a copy of my testimony and the 18-page essay for your information.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you haven't lost your skills at how to testify. Your service in the legislature is still with you, and appreciate you sponsoring the contest, and we will look at Spencer's suggestions. So thank you for coming this morning.
Mhm.
Your suggestions are very timely because we are soon embarking upon a sustainable materials planning process. And that sounds like it fits very well with the topic of the essay.
Thank you. All right, next up is Tom Cordier. Would you come up to the table, please? Good morning.
Good morning. Tom Cordier, I live in North Albany. Current technologies require plastic producers to put a decal on their plastics that indicates that it's recyclable or not. If there's no decal, it's not recyclable. But if there is a decal that says it is recyclable, it ought to be recycled. And I don't particularly know the rules of Republic Services as it services Corvallis, but I know in Albany, I'm not a happy camper because Republic, when we were notified a few years ago now that China wasn't taking unsorted plastics, that they quit taking recyclables because in my view, they wouldn't do the due diligence to find resources that do take recyclables. For example, in Albany, you have to have a bottle that has threads on it in order to qualify to be recyclable. Well, when my wife buys a turkey or a chicken at any place in town, those domes have a recycle stamp on it. And yet our city council won't require them to take that material. And to me, it's nothing but negligence on the part of Republic Services, because I have contacted several companies across the United States that take that kind of recycle and recycle it. But Republic won't take it. And I just would encourage you to get tough with Republic people and tell them you're not happy with that. And because they're the guys that are wanting more space to put stuff in the ground, and yet they won't stop putting stuff in the ground and find people to take those recyclables. And it infuriates me that they get away with that, because not only did they not take it, they increased our fees. So it's a double whammy that they've been allowed to lower on the ratepayers, and it's not right. And so in your discussions about convincing people or trying to influence people at Republic's request to increase the size of their facility, there's another set of existing technologies that are available that they're not using and they haven't been using, and they take the money, but they don't do the research and they don't do the phone calls and set up a system to take recyclables. And it's wrong. One other statement I'll make, because you haven't indicated I'm out of time, but I don't know if the Brooks facility is out of capacity to take materials for that facility and process it, because for years, I've been asking Republic through our city council to investigate that. And I've never got a response about whether they can take any more of those products. But Republic Services has told me personally that they take great pride in not allowing any of their materials that they collect from residences to go to that facility. And yet it's a permitted facility. You may disagree with that, but it is permitted even in our crazy state. And so if there is capacity, or how can they increase their capacity? What is the limit? What limits their capacity? And can that capacity be increased if they're out?
Okay.
So I would encourage you to look at that a little more, okay?
Would you?
And I'm out of time.
All right, well, thank you, and your comments are timely, and we will be having discussions with Republic on how they can do a better job for our community.
Okay, thank you.
But,
Thank you.
Yep.
I think one of the biggest challenges is just plain old markets, and that some of the production and the reuse of some of those types of plastic is very specialized, and the companies are far away. So it's actually more expensive to ship the material there than the product is worth. And that's part of what has been a limiting factor. If we could encourage businesses here, that would be great. And I'm really hoping that, again, through our sustainable materials management planning, which will involve people not just in Benton County, but across the area, including the Brooks, facility, what's going on in Marion County, Polk, you name it. We will be able to get to some better answers and actually reduce the waste that's going into the landfill. That's our goal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is our monthly COVID update, April Holland. Good morning.
Good morning. Hi, Commissioner Suzanne, everyone here. I have a super brief COVID update for you today. Yeah, it's another quick one. We are appreciative of this literally and figuratively sunny period of low COVID transmission. We do continue to monitor hospitalizations, testing positivity, and wastewater monitoring to assess COVID-19 transmission in our communities. Right now, in terms of hospitalizations, the number of individuals hospitalized with COVID-19 across the state was 113 at last update. Last month, that figure was 133, and it's been above or below 150 for several months now. And here in Benton County, 2 people were hospitalized as of the last update last week. Statewide, moving on to testing positivity, statewide, we've seen a bit of an increase in testing positivity from our Sentinel laboratories. It's at around 7.5%, and that's up from about 4% previously. Indicative of, a number of things potentially, but there is more testing happening and likely some pockets of transmission continuing in areas around the state. If we look, CDC has also incorporated regional testing positivity pooling, those HHS regions. And so Region 10, which, as you know, is Alaska, Idaho, Washington, Oregon. Did I miss one? Did I say 4? It's at about 5%. So not an alarming rate, not above 10%, but I think that latest figure is something to keep an eye on. And in terms of where this is happening, in Oregon, one place where we do monitor is wastewater surveillance. across the state, about 75% of monitoring locations have had no change in their wastewater signals. There are a few areas north of us with increased signals around Silverton, Durham, Staten area. And as we've seen previously, usually after those increased signals are detected, we see increase in COVID-19 transmission about 2 or 3 weeks later. So we'll definitely keeping an eye on our community, and we'll keep you apprised. The dominant strains out there continue to be Omicron all the way. The latest baby of Omicron, there's a bunch of XBB sublineages that are continue to lead the field. Our CD team continues to work really hard on providing support to long-term care facilities and other prioritized residential facilities and medical facilities. We currently have 2 COVID-19 investigators still on staff. One is slated to end their limited duration in September, and the other we have funding to continue through June of next year. So it's really important to us that we can continue to provide that one-on-one response to outbreaks when they occur. We learned last month that FDA advised vaccine manufacturers to update boosters with a monovalent XBB composition. We still have no specific timeline right now, but FDA suggested that updated vaccines could be available around September. After FDA provides a recommendation, the CDC ACIP board is the next to convene, and their meeting is August 3rd. And that's when they'll get into the details of who should be prioritized, if there's a prioritization schedule, the recommendations for ages, dosages, et cetera. And of course, anytime we want to be mindful of capacity here at the county and in our overall infrastructure of being able to provide vaccines. While we do think so much depends on what the recommendations are going to be for the boosters, we anticipate that there's going to be some increased demand, but nothing that will overwhelm our resources here. And that's all I have for you today.
Thank you, April. I think my biggest question is, are we starting to use, or is the state starting to use wastewater surveillance for tracking other viruses as well? So that we have a sense for COVID in the context of influenza or RSV or some of the others. Just curious, because it seems like we're getting into that point where there's normalization, but yet we still, I think the surveillance technology is really useful.
I absolutely agree. I know this has been a topic of discussion statewide. I think that there would be some logistical and cost considerations in deploying it to all of the current COVID-19 locations. I don't have the details on where those discussions are. I know that, using testing positivity for influenza, RSV, and COVID-19 is certainly valuable with the Sentinel laboratories. And I know I'm not alone in seeing value in the wastewater surveillance as well.
So yeah, maybe a Sentinel system for wastewater also, that would be a good idea.
Well, I was wondering when we change the schedule to monthly, and I think the frequency is, at least for this time of year, is about right. And we need it because it's summertime. Things are good. COVID, what's that? And so it's, I appreciate that you and your team are being vigilant. Is it accurate? So there's kind of a background level of COVID that's going on. It's not nearly as high as it was a few months ago, but it's there. And I think it's accurate to say summer won't last forever, and we get into fall and school and more people inside.
You know me, Commissioner, I'm gotta have a caveat there, that, yeah, it's absolutely, there. Our ways of measuring COVID-19 have changed with the end of the public health emergency. We're no longer measuring individual cases. And so moving to these broader surveillance methods are going to, that analysis and constant monitoring are going to be very important to keep our community apprised of what's going on. Also, you know, the hospitalization numbers, the wastewater monitoring, that testing positivity, they are at lower levels than we've seen in quite some time. So I can never know for certain what the fall or winter will bring, but as you mentioned, folks gathering indoors in the cold weather is likely to, we're likely to see some increased transmission with that. Really heartened to see that at this point, we're seeing a lot of similar subvariants versus anything that is currently newly concerning.
Okay, well, I appreciate your efforts, and I won't quiz you on the booster and that advice till at least next month, but
Sounds good.
but I will. So,
We'll share what we know. Thank you.
all right. Thanks, April. All right, next up, Forest Stewardship Project Summary Update at Moselle Forest Harvest. We have Adam Stebbins and Jesse Ott. Good morning.
Morning, Commissioners. Well, thank you for having us. You know, we're coming on the heels of a successful project, the Meadow Connectivity Project out at the Moselle Memorial Forest from last year. And we're moving on to the next projects in our Forest Stewardship Plan that was recently updated. And this is a big project. This is about as big as we've ever done in the county. And, you know, this project really sets the stage for, you know, all the improvements out there at Moselle, that trust, you know, this Forest Stewardship Plan. We have a great project here, and the proceeds for it will be really beneficial for the site, for the education center, gravel on the trails, potential parking, and continued management of the Moselle Memorial Forest. And so we're just really thrilled to put this plan together because it really continues in the spirit of what Fred Moselle was hoping that forest would be as a working forest. So I'll pass it over to Adam Stebbins, our natural resources coordinator and technical expert. And he's put together a really great project here with our team. So I wanted to share it with you.
Thanks, Jesse, and good morning, Commissioners. So as Jesse mentioned, this is a sizable operation as part of the updated Forest Stewardship Plan, which is our 10-year plan that was adopted in 2020. I think you guys have a slide deck that, you know, outlines what we're talking about. I'm happy to jump into detail on that if you want. Really hits the highlights of what we've already accomplished under the stewardship plan and where we're going. So the first slide here is showing some of the cut to length harvest work that was done, as Jesse mentioned, with our North Meadow expansion and connectivity project. So that has very high priority under our habitat conservation plan as well with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So we've utilized the thinning operation combined with the meadow connectivity. And this worked really well for sustainable forestry, which is, you know, the mission and what the Moselles really wanted at Moselle Memorial Forest when the county acquired the property, and very low impact approach that worked really well. We're trending in positive directions in all of the resource management units that we developed and adopted in 2020. So we have excellent recruitment, natural fir establishment in our Douglas fir dominated units and also our mixed oak woodland units. We've done quite a bit of oak release, so saving a lot of the legacy oaks out there that were getting overtopped by Douglas fir. This is sort of early stage where we were connecting the meadows. It is, obviously a lot of disturbance at first, but over time, this is just going to be prized habitat, 3-acre expansion of that North Meadow habitat where like Taylor's checker spot, other endangered species call home. Moving into the next project, which again, it's definitely the largest that I'm aware of. It's within our east units. And what we found during the stewardship work that our consulting forester completed is some of the highest quality Douglas fir in the entire site, but also a lot of damaged Douglas fir from the ice storms 2014, 21. So we have a lot of dead tops, which also provide excellent habitat. So right now we have a request for proposals out. It's focused within these units here. I think it disappears on the screen, but
Looks like an arrowhead.
yeah, it kind of looks like an arrowhead or a fish there. So B24, B25, B27, very high quality, again, very prized, especially now in the log markets. And so thinning and then small scale regen clear cuts where we have age classes that are sort of maxing out. The stand needs to be restarted or else we would be getting into those sizes and age classes that aren't going to be suitable for most of the mills. As Jesse mentioned, I threw this slide in here for him. Lots of work to do out at Bazell. We already have done quite a bit of work, especially since 2020, namely this east unit and also on the north and south access roads that you can see. We've done quite a bit of road upgrades, basing, culverts, drainage. We put in over a couple dozen culverts, increased the ability for that road to have longevity, especially driving heavy equipment over it. So that combined with the trail work, but there's quite a bit of maintenance division work that has to get done that I'm sure Jesse could talk with you more about. So again, the RFP is out right now. It was released last Friday. We created this as a team with our Parks Board review and approval last week. Taking a very, like we always do, multifaceted, sustainable forestry approach where, anyone in the private sector that has the forestry and logging experience, to oversee the work that we're requesting and the multiple goals that we're managing for out there has about a 6-week window to get it done. And then we start with our scoring, which our scoring committee or what we call our selection committee will be the directors, myself, and then a member of the Parks Board that is highly knowledgeable about forestry. Actually supported our forest stewardship plan development also, so that'll be great to have them. Moving into completing the works, or excuse me, starting the work and then completing the work a year and a couple months later. So we have a very large window on the actual work being completed to make sure that we're making progress, but also timing markets, timing potential impacts as weather and all sorts of dynamics out on the landscape when you're doing something like this can change. So working with someone who has that flexibility, adaptive management out there. And yeah, that's the highlights. So any questions or comments, ideas would be perfect.
You say you did I know you did culvert work last year, so it's only been just a few months since those streams have had better passage?
So the culvert would have been just on, they're just small drainage culverts, cross culverts across the access road.
Okay, no fish passage related culverts.
No.
I know there's only one larger stream on the property, right?
There is, and we did meet with ODOT out there about a year ago, and we are on the list. I think they're not exactly sure what the timing is going to be, but that culvert over Plunkett Creek is going to be replaced from the round to the box style, better fits passage. So that project is in the works with ODOT.
Excellent.
And that would be across Highway 223.
That's correct. Yeah.
So I know when you do logging, you need roads. Are some of these roads going to be permanent and well graveled, and so you can use them in the future? And then probably a few smaller roads that feed into that. Is that the general idea?
Well, the goal really is to use the existing network that we've beefed up over the last year. So the entry would be made from that main network and then hauling to that. So you might have, temporary hauling roads or hauling routes really for the equipment and for harvesters, forwarders, however the proposals come through as far as what method of logging makes sense to achieve the goals for each one of these units. So anything that is used to access any access routes, they would be, I would plan that they would be decommissioned, and just like on our last operation, they, are really returned to the forest and understory develops over time and everything like that.
Okay. And Adam, you mentioned low impact. I assume that means the equipment flotation and try to minimize the soil compaction.
Yeah, so the successful, contractor that was selected through a similar process during our first operation, Miller Timber Services out of Columbus was the successful contractor, and they utilized their Ponce equipment, which is a cut to length harvester, forwarders, which have very low ground pressure compared to, a standard dozer or, yarding out with steel track. And so, or just steel track. So the multiple factors of the scoring include, how are you proposing to haul this material out? What is the impact on the landscape going to look like? Because your method of logging really determines what your impact is in that resource management unit, and then what you're dealing with for years to come. So we have to factor that in when we're scoring these proposals.
And how much of an impact will this particular project have on recreational uses out on the forest? And is that part of the kind of seasonal planning and timing as well?
So the first part of your question, I think it's going to should have minimal, just because this is in a remote area where people aren't supposed to be hiking. I mean, it's all public land, but we don't have designated trails within that area. There is hauling near where some people might be hiking, but none of these access routes that are going to be utilized are where we have designated trails. And your second part of the question, as far as how it's factored in, is making sure that timing is, taken into account because of traffic impacts on the road, wet versus dry season, all of the multiple uses that we manage for out there. So the applicants have to address that in the proposal and make a case why their method and their operational plan would be best to meet all these goals.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm remembering our setup, and so in this second 10-year plan, I assume it's Trout Mountain that's doing the overall plan, and then the RFP opens up the actual operations.
No. So Trout Mountain was the successful applicant that developed our overall stewardship plan as a private forestry consultant. We are managing and coordinating every operation that's within that plan. So there was a shift in 2020 to state we have the ability to diversify who can bid on these projects, who can help us develop the harvest plans, and then who is going to be overseeing the logging. So we have a much larger pool than just having one primary forester, and they select, who completes the work for the entire plan. So it's opened up a lot more options as far as who can bid on these projects and what methods can be brought to bear. And then we also have our own sustainable forestry certification through FSC, which was established in 21. So we work with a FSC auditor, and they oversee our operations. And then we, as Benton County, hold the certificate for sustainable forestry, which is unique and appreciated by our board, and pretty cool that we have that.
I appreciate that clarification. I knew there was a change.
Yeah, no problem.
With the second 10-year plan, and this, I appreciate the update and the thoughtful approach that we are taking. So
Yeah, it's working well. Appreciate the time and support for sure.
it's a great asset for Benton County, and I think we are, like you mentioned, helping Fred Bazell with his long-term vision for the property that he generously donated to Benton County. Thank you.
Thanks.
Moving right along. Item 5.1, approval of the July 5th, 2023 board meeting in the consent calendar.
Okay, I will move approval of the consent calendar.
I will second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Consent calendars approved. Item number 6.1, Benton County Sustainable Materials Management Plan. And the next step, we have Aaron Nichols and Daniel. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. You look kind of lonely up there this morning.
We should spread out more so we look bigger.
Well, it feels like the odds are better for staff down on this end. Thank you very much for seeing us this morning. Happy Tuesdays. Nice to see you. This should be a fairly short agenda item. This picks up on a couple of conversations that we've had with you recently. And really what we're talking about this morning is what we're asking you to do is to appoint a temporary task force for the express purpose of helping the board and staff develop a request for proposal for a consultant or a consulting team that can help us develop a sustainable materials management plan. I really want to start by saying thank you to Senator Yee and Mr. Cloutier for their comments this morning. Those are exactly the kinds of issues that we anticipate considering, addressing, and weaving into a long-term sustainable materials management plan. So their comments were timely, and I just appreciate the level of interest and support from the community for the board and for us as we do this important work. So you'll see in front of you a list of names, suggested names for appointment. As we thought about kind of, this is a temporary task force, will be completed within, we expect the next month or so. It's important to have a balanced and representative group that works well together and is committed to the topic. And when we thought about those just basic criteria, we think there's no better group than the existing Benton County Tox Trash work group, the public members of the work group. So we're suggesting that you appoint those 8 persons to serve for the next month as this temporary work group. As you know, Benton County Tox Trash is a much larger work group. But this is the group that's really represents the community. I think that's the right scope and scale. We've reached out to all of them, heard back from all of them. All but one have expressed commitment to attend. The last member is interested and willing, but was concerned about the summer schedule. And, so we're suggesting that you go ahead and appoint these folks, then let us work on the logistics to have to get their feedback and input into the RFP. In addition, we're suggesting that it would be wise for the board to leave an open invitation for counties who would like to appoint a representative to participate in the process. There's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, other counties may have sample RFPs that would be nice to pull from. It'd be really nice to have that expertise at the table as we think about how to structure this. But also, as we move into the SMMP process, we expect that other counties will be key partners in helping us address solid waste across the Willamette Valley in Western Oregon. And so with that perspective, we think it's important to open that invitation, get them thinking about how they can help Benton County and how we really can work in partnership across Western Oregon. So last but not least, just taking a quick look at next steps. In your memo, you'll see kind of where we are. We've already done the call for an exploratory advisory group. We're asking you today to appoint that temporary task force. Over the next month, we will convene them, develop the RFP, bring that back to you in mid-August, and then ask you for input, feedback, and kind of final refinements ready for a release of the RFP to the public on September 5th. So we're still very much on schedule, if you agree with us. And I thought it was important to kind of also just mention that the next steps would be part of those discussions in mid-August and early September. So we think that's where we should talk about an ad hoc committee structure for the entire SMMP process, a more deliberative, collaborative governance type structure, and then also discuss the process for interviewing and selecting a consultant or team. And I want to say thank you, especially to your suggestions last time, that we weave in a bidder selection process right up front so that we make ourselves available, but also we get a really good sense for who's out there and how they can help. And then finally, I think during that, I just encourage us to think about what we can do to make sure the board gets briefed regularly. We don't want to overwhelm you with updates, but we also don't want you to lose sight of this project over the next 2 or 3 years as it unfolds and we work our way towards a plan. So that's what we have this morning.
My question is about the other county folks. Given the short time window in terms of the work of this task force, I think it's going to be important that if there are appointments from other counties that happen really expeditiously. That might be a little bit of a challenge. Do you already have a couple of people identified, and have you made some outreach?
Yeah, Daniel, please. There you go. Thanks.
So we haven't made specific outreach to counties for this RFP review and development. We've had the opportunity to speak with counties throughout the BCTT process, and folks have already expressed interest in participating in future stages of our work. So that's where we sort of drew the conclusion that there would be counties that would potentially be interested in participating in this part of it. But back to Darren's original point, we wanted to put that invitation out there for folks that might be available to participate, but certainly with the expectation that more and more representatives from different counties would want to take part in the further discussions as an ad hoc committee is developed for the SMMP production. And basically any folks who would be willing and available to participate on this shorter timeline, we'd extend that invitation to them.
Yeah, I will be in touch with my colleagues from Lynn County later this afternoon, and at the National Association of Counties meeting starting tomorrow. And I know that a couple of, Marion and Polk folks for sure will be there. So I'd be happy to at least socialize the idea with some of my colleagues while I'm there. Some of them may not have quorum for their meetings in the next few days. So yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Ogerow. Please do, any of you who are interacting with county colleagues, just socialize the notion. We've been doing that on an informal basis. So while we haven't put out a formal invitation, we've definitely been socializing it with the Association of Oregon County Planning Directors. We've had strong interest from Lane County, Marion County, Lincoln County, Tillamook County. So without sort of prescribing that this morning, I think it's important if you're comfortable, just leave direct staff to leave that invitation open, and then please continue to invite counties into this conversation.
Happy to do that. I also heard on the radio this morning that Lane County had just hired a new person that was talking trash. Really focused on food waste reduction, and yeah, she was on the radio. So it was interesting to hear that they were even using our words.
See what you started.
So there's 8 names listed here, and I'm impressed that you have most or maybe all of them continuing after you kind of trick them into, well, no, this is going to wrap up in December, and well, maybe February or March. I really appreciate that they're willing to continue, and I think we have good momentum behind this project, and important to keep that going. So there's 8 names listed here, and I remember a discussion of somebody retiring from OSU that was interested. Is he part of this initial group?
Yes, you'll see on the list there, John Dool is the second name. Very, very pleased to have John's participation and also Oregon State University's support. Yeah, we're just thrilled that these folks are still willing to serve. I mean, they have gone above and beyond. We've said thank you a number of times. I think we should say thank you again and recognize their service.
So this sounds like the core group, and then add, like you say, other counties representation. I think you mentioned DEQ has some interest. I guess, what's your vision for the size of the group, and just how the relationship between the core group and some of these other entities, how that might work?
Well, for right now, I think these 8 individuals, and then as many counties as are interested and able to join, should be the size of the group. And I know that leaves that open-ended, but I think in practical terms, we're probably looking at around a dozen or 15 at the most, just given the fact that this is a 1-month interim step. Other members like DEQ or other members of the community or other institutions and organizations, the longer list that we shared with you last time should be part of the extended SMMP planning process. What I'm suggesting is that after we have the RFP refined and bring it back to you, that's when we should have a more deep discussion about how to structure the participation so that everyone's included at the right level and it's manageable for staff. And it includes the right kind of the key participants like we talked about earlier. So if you're willing, Mr. Chair, I would suggest that we have that conversation when we come back to you in August with a revised RFP and some additional input and recommendations from the community members about how best to include everyone and how to structure participation so that it's meaningful.
Great, that helps helps me have a picture of what this group will look like going forward. And I also like the idea of regular reports to the board so that we know what's going on. Because we hear from constituents and get their input into this process. I am ready.
I move to appoint the ad hoc limited term advisory task force members as recommended, including Catherine Bisco, John Dool, Catherine Duvall, Christopher McMorrin, Ryan McAllister, Mary Parmigiani, Ed Patera, Louisa Shelby, and also to include county appointees as they are interested for this short-term process.
I'll second that. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
I actually didn't get all of the task of the task force in as well. I could either amend that motion or add it as a second motion.
Why don't you amend the original
Okay.
motion?
The task force intent is to develop with staff and present to the board a final draft request for proposals for the Sustainable Materials Management Plan not later than August 2023.
All right, I will second that. All in favor of the amended motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll look forward to hearing how this effort progresses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's that? Yeah.
You like me to leave and then come back? I'm never quite sure. It's awkward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next up is new business 7.1 Marys River Watershed Council funding request. We have Rick Greger and Darren Nichols with us.
You know, you would think I would learn this by now. So thanks, sir. Again, just to give a little background, we've had discussions here in front of you in relation to some of the smaller grants that the Board of Commissioners have at least traditionally approved through the budget development process. Our conversations prior to the budget build for 23-25 was that really wanted to create the process in which we are, as a budget committee and as ultimately the Board of Commissioners, adopting a budget that is specific to resources, but to be able to bring those grants in front of you in the process of execution. So I think we still have some opportunities for us to continue to build and improve this program and how we want to operate this, but this is sort of a first step in that we adopted a budget. These are resources that we have set aside, but we are now bringing the more specifics to you as a relation to approval. So you'll be seeing me, as I think I mentioned before, we did get approval from you at the last meeting for the Economic Development Office. That was one of those grants, contracts that come out of that process. You'll see another one after this today, later, in terms of the Water Resource Department that I'll be presenting. But with this specific grant, I'll let Darren kind of provide some overview in relation to it. But some of the conversations that we'd had a traditional grant given to Mary's Watershed in the past. We wanted to make sure that there was a process in which they submitted an application. I think also the Board of Commissioners had suggested that this would be really better administered through the Community Development Department. So we got Darren involved in this, and I know that they have been working directly with the organization here. So I'll turn this to Darren to let him talk a little bit about the grant itself. That's all right, or I'm happy to if you wish. I think the other piece to this that I think Darren and I would like to know, we want to make sure going forward with all these grants that we're building actual agreements. We've not had those in the past for these, so we want to make sure there are good agreements. I think we can follow the pattern that we started with ARPA. We have templates put in place. But I think part of that also becomes, what are our expectations? What are the outcomes? What are the things that we want to ensure that is being accomplished with these dollars? And how do we want to effectively monitor them and perhaps report out? And I think that's, Darren and I both would like a little guidance. I think we're both poised to be able to move an agreement forward, but we just wanted to have this discussion with you to make sure that we're getting it right. So Darren, do you want to provide some more context to the actual request? No, I'll do whatever you want.
Well, thank you very much, Rick, for teeing this up. And thank you, commissioners, for paying attention to this. I want to say, first of all, thank you to Marys River Watershed Council for being good partners and being really caring about the landscape in Benton County. I think what you see here is a proposal to do what they call a Trout-Friendly Landscapes Green Infrastructure Program, which could be all kinds of things, but basically it's using private landowners' willingness plus Marys River Watershed Council expertise and other partners to develop water quality improvements across the landscape. It's an important, obviously water and water quality important to the community in Benton County, to the commission and to our staff. How we do this, however, is really important. And I think in our conversations with Marys River Watershed Council and with others, there are lots of really good efforts happening out on the landscape. Oregon State University is doing pilot projects. We also have recently adopted a stormwater management policy and are doing work in this space. In a few minutes, you're going to hear from Toby Lewis about those updates, significant proposed updates to FEMA's flood program relating to habitat restoration and protection for endangered species. With all of these moving parts, it becomes critically important that we know the role that Benton County is playing, know what our relationship is to each of those partners, and that we're working to harness those efforts so that we get the most kind of bang for the buck, if you will. So I really appreciate Rick's support in wanting to lay out an agreement with Marys River Watershed Council that we know what to expect from them. We also know kind of what our role is and should be in supporting that from a staff perspective, and that others looking on know how they can bring their resources to the table in a way that doesn't duplicate efforts or get in the way of this really good. So welcome your thoughts, guidance. I think we're kind of feeling our way forward, but with good intentions and really wanting to strengthen those partnerships.
One thing I just might add as it relates to the thoughts around accountability and expectations. and I've mentioned this to Darren, I mean, we have applied standards through our ARPA grants. I'm not, obviously those are federal dollars and many times driven by requirements. So I just wanted you all to know, I think we have some standards that I've told Darren about that we're happy to work with that can be very deep or very light. But I think on the minimum, it would seem to be appropriate to always have some kind of validation in relation to the expenditure. How was those dollars particularly used? Again, that can be more in the form of a report. We have traditionally spent these grants up front. I always call it the back end accountability, where you spend dollars and then ask for information at the end. So this is a relatively smaller grant. So I think we can put some accountability measures in place that enable some form of, let's say, closeout financial report if we're still going to do that up front, and then add in some programmatic expectations into the agreement, and then report back on how did you actually meet those. So we're prepared to be able to do that. We have the format, but I think we just want to make sure we have sort of your general thoughts and directions before we proceed.
I thank you for bringing this to us. I'm glad we included it in the budget. I completely agree that we need to have a little more structure in the way we grant money. We need to be cognizant of the capacity of some of the organizations we work with. And I'm particularly familiar with the Marys River Watershed Council and how few staff they have, although they're extremely capable people. So yes, I'm all for having some notion of what the accomplishments might be, whether it's how many landowners they work with in partnership with the community development and public works staff for a period of the year, and some sort of a final report. But don't make it too burdensome. Otherwise, it's really hardly worth it.
Thank you for saying that. We're very mindful of that. I think on our end as well, none of us have the resources we want. We don't want this to be onerous. I should have offered a little bit extra context too. And I'm sorry, Daniel stepped away, but Daniel convened a meeting, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks ago among the watershed partners and agencies and our colleagues at Public Works, just to kind of talk about water monitoring and who's doing what and how could we do a better job of supporting each other. And I was very pleased with the level of strong interest and support among the organizations to develop a collaborative strategy, if you will. And I think we're a little bit kind of cart before the horse here in that, we're being asked to invest some dollars, which you should do, and we're supportive. But I think the next time we come back to the table, we'll have the benefit of a better feel for the landscape and who's doing what, make it much easier for all of us to be accountable for how we're spending money and the collective impacts, which is really what we're all about. So I'm hopeful that when we come back to you next biennium or whenever we come back to you with a report, it's much easier for these organizations to demonstrate their contribution to the overall and give you a sense for that.
I like that direction and the plan to think about not working just with one nonprofit, but the multiple entities in the area, including Benton Soil and Water Conservation District, that are doing similar work, as well as a handful of others. I also completely appreciate the fact that it's very difficult for a small entity like the Watershed Council to even come to the table and do that planning work, that collaborative work, without some support. So I think this is a first step, and I think it's a good first step.
Well, I do appreciate having our finance person involved in the process and standardizing what we ask of people asking us for money for their very worthwhile efforts, but we have to set priorities, and it's hard to set priorities if you're doing one-off and this looks like a good one or makes me feel good today, but rather getting a bigger picture of in this case, what's going on with improving water quality in our region, and like Commissioner Ogerow said, making sure that people like Ben Soil and Water are involved and know what's going on, and other partners that may help the overall effort, so that everybody knows what the other group is doing currently, and what the plans are for future efforts. And I know there's significant state and federal dollars available for some of these type projects, and capacity is often a issue. So if there's more of a centralized effort, I think we have a better chance of getting in the game on some of these other grant opportunities. But I appreciate Benton County kind of getting our house in order, and this is the process and the deadlines and what we expect in return as far as reporting. So appreciate might be a little bit painful at first, kind of enforcing some coordination and standardization of our process, but I think it'll serve us well in the long run. So
Thank you, Commissioner. And just to respond a little bit to Commissioner Ogerow, I think Commissioner Ogerow, you know me well enough by now that obviously, as a financial person, I'm bringing to you the ideas of accountability and ensuring that we have good internal controls and practices, and that'll always be a theme. But I think you also know about me that have a lot of respect for the small organizations out there. And to your point, I think we have to be mindful of those small organizations. Having worked with a lot of those since coming here, particularly with ARPA, they don't have a lot of staff. And so I just want to assure both of you that there is a place that you can land to provide sort of the accountability oversight, but not put the burden of major reporting. So I just want to give you my assurance that in coordinating with Darren, I think we can find that balance that's going to give us the ability to know what our money is buying, and how is it moving us forward where we want to go, at the same time not being an overburden to some of our smaller partners. So thank you.
well, and the other side to that, I've worked with small volunteer nonprofits, and sometimes getting the grant is the easy part, and then now we have to do some work, and there may be a limit on how long we have to get the project done. So having those expectations clearly stated up front, I think serves both parties.
Ready for a motion?
I am so ready.
Okay, I move to approve funding in the amount of $10,550 to the Marys River Watershed Council for work on a trout-friendly landscape infrastructure project.
I will second that. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. You handle one more item and then we'll do a break. Okay. Item 7.2, management, confidential and non-representative employee compensation. Tracy Martineau and Rick Greger.
That per policy, 22.2, the HR manager is responsible for periodically reviewing compensation and bringing recommendations for any changes every year. And so this is one of those things. What we're asking for you today is to pre-approve with a limit of 5%, our ability to adjust salary ranges and individual pay by the ECI, the Employment Cost Index. That index is published on July the 28th, and that will be for the 12-month period ending on June 30th. At the March publication, the ECI was running at 5%. Anecdotally, what we're hearing from economists is that it is expected to be flat, but we really don't know until the number is actually published. And so I've conferred with our CFO, Rick Krager, in terms of our affordability. And Rick, I don't know if you want to say anything about the funding aspect of this.
Thanks, Tracy. And again, commissioners, you recall last year in terms of this adjustment, and I think, past historically, there were adjustments made as it related to the ranges. I think as Tracy proposes here, that this would give us the authority to make not only that range adjustment, but also be able to make a increase at the same time, which is relatively best practices, we see in other organizations. So in preparation for that, and knowing that we had done it last year, one of the things that we took the steps for that we hadn't done in the past was actually make some assumptions. You might recall in the budget development process, we made some assumptions for increases in management, similar to like what we would do for any kind of bargaining situation. So I will say that it's likely that our forecasting perhaps is a little lower than what is being suggested here. I think we built into our forecasting around 3% in relation to this, but that was for both years. That may be something I'm just putting out there that we may have to address budgetarily as we go down the road. But at the same time, I think this is a best practice. I think this is the right thing to do if we as an employer are going to be able to recognize that the cost of living is rising. We've seen huge inflationary increases, and I think this is the right thing to be able to do moving forward. So again, I don't anticipate coming to you initially out of the gate here with the budget say, no, my gosh, we've got to solve an issue. But if, let's say, it does come out to the 5%, we will probably have to be looking closely as we move into next year and see what that brings. And we may have to have some conversations about supplemental.
One of the other elements that's included in the salient facts portion of the agenda checklist is that, as you know, we're undergoing the management confidential non-rep compensation study as well at this time. We expect that study to be completed in August. Taking this action at this point in time will help mitigate whatever impact the results of that study have. Our preliminary numbers that we've received from the consultant indicate. Thank you. Our preliminary numbers that we've received from the consultant indicate that we are lagging behind. And so an action at this time will help to mitigate that impact of the comp study.
My question there is, do we have some money budgeted for mitigating the impact of the comp study already, as well as that 3% that was budgeted for pay increases?
So part of the preparing for that was some of the conservative approaches that we suggested on our reserves, knowing, as you might recall, we were above best practices. And there was a reason for that, knowing that we might likely need to pull on some of those reserves depending on where that study comes out. I did not dedicate a specific little pot of dollars in terms of it, but that's where, again, the reserve discussion. So we will be prepared.
And then as a result of the comp study, I would expect that their increases for different professions might not be completely the same. So some would need more adjustment than others, but everyone deserves that basic ECI-based bump anyway. So yes, I think this two-step process makes sense. I don't have any further questions.
Is the ECI published quarterly or?
It is. It's published, the index reflects both quarterly increases as well as the previous 12-month period for each of those quarters. So for example, the 12-month period that ended in March that was at 5% was reflective of the 12-month of the preceding 12-month period. And the index that will be published on July the 28th will be reflective of the 12-month period that ended June 30th.
Okay. And is that the one that these pay increases will be based on?
Correct.
Okay. And so this, like Commissioner Ojero said, there's a variety of non-represented people, but as a group, it will be anticipated to be a 5% pay increase. And when would that take effect?
If you approve this, once the index is published on July 28th, we will work with payroll to implement retroactive to July 1st.
And just a note that that does not include the electeds in this process.
So to answer the question, no, this would not include the electeds, but at the same time, we are scheduled for late August. I don't have the specific date with convening the Citizens Budget Committee, which you have charged with establishing annual or biennial adjustments. And as last year, this will be at least information that we provide to them for their consideration.
Okay, thank you.
One other piece I want to build on what Commissioner Ojero was asking earlier, because I don't think I completely answered in relation to we've anticipated going forward with these increases. But one of the challenges I think we have, and this is a bigger problem for another day that I don't have necessarily a perfect answer, but as it relates to some of our budgets, you know, they're related to enterprise funds. And the biggest one is the community health centers. And one of the things that we face oftentimes with these decisions is that, you know, we're arbitrarily increasing. And this is the true with bargaining as well, that their budgets are based on revenue. They're not based on a general fund that has reserves. Ideally, we want to move to that place where our enterprise funds have adequate reserves. You know, from the presentations that we've discussed with the community health centers, we have our budget challenges ahead of us. So I just want to put that out there as, you know, to be mindful of as we move forward, that these increases, while built in for cost, they also sometimes require revenue. So again, the health centers are projected from as it relates to the projections, they're assuming increases. But the dollars have to be there as well. And you all know that's something that we're going to continue to.
All right. Are we ready for a motion?
Yes, I just want to acknowledge that this may present some more challenges for some of those enterprise-based departments, and that we just have to work with them in order to work through those processes. But also have to acknowledge the cost of employment. Yeah. Okay, I move to approve up to a 5% ECI adjustment effective July 1, 2023 for non-represented employee salary ranges and individual pay based on the ECI for the 12-month period ending June 30, 2023.
I will second the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Well, thank you for explaining a fairly complicated subject.
Thank you, commissioners. I will be sending out a communication to non-represented employees, letting them know of your action.
And
Thank you.
A couple housekeeping things here. We will have the executive session probably a little before noon. So stay tuned.
Thank you.
And with that, we will take a probably longer than 5 minutes, shorter than 10-minute break. So be back before 10:35. All right, we're ready to resume our board meeting. Next up, 8.1, request for authorization to partner with FEMA as cooperating agency. Aaron Nichols and maybe not Toby.
Well, good morning again. Yes,
There she.
I certainly hope that Toby is online. I see her smiling face under a tree somewhere north of us. I'm not going to say too much except to introduce Toby and say very special thanks to Toby for carrying the water on this, literally and figuratively. Thanks, Toby.
Sure. Toby Lewis, Community Development. And Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to attend virtually. I'm up here in Seattle at my son's soccer camp, so it's a little bit noisy sometimes, but hopefully you can hear okay. So this is a topic that we have talked about a number of times now. It's been, so the implementation of regulations that will help mitigate impacts to endangered species has been a topic at FEMA and among National Marine Fisheries Service staff for a while now. It's been about 14 years. It popped up again the beginning of this year, and we discussed it in April and then again the beginning of May. FEMA, as you know, FEMA is working on finalizing their implementation plan for identifying what the regulations and things will be. They have begun an environmental impact statement to evaluate the effects of the regulations once drafted and identified clearly, and have offered Benton County an opportunity to participate in that drafting process as a cooperating agency. That's typically something that, well, historically, that's been a status that has been offered to federal and state agencies. There were a couple counties in Oregon, Tillamook and Umatilla, who requested that status. And because of the unique nature of this project, FEMA was authorized to open up that opportunity for local jurisdictions. You've got all the information in the memorandum, and I also included, or I'm sorry, yeah, the memo that I put together, and I included a copy of the memo from the meeting last May, as well as a copy of the very draft memorandum of agreement that FEMA provided, just to give us kind of an idea of what that would look like. Certainly it's not finalized, and it would be reviewed and approved prior to signing off on, if that's something that the board would like staff to do. The goal in being a cooperating agency would be to help facilitate public comment and input as the information is being drafted. It doesn't, as a community, we would not be required to comment if there are things that don't need a comment, or if that doesn't work out. There's no penalty for not commenting, but it does allow us an extra opportunity as the regulations are being drafted to help provide input. And there will be, once the plan is finalized, there will be another broad scale opportunity for comment as well. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer as I can. Yeah.
I think my biggest question is the time commitment and how this fits in our larger body of work. I rather like the idea of that trio of counties, Tillamook, Umatilla, and Benton, participating, because we have very different interests and geographies and constituencies. And I think that group could be really informative to FEMA as they continue on this regulatory journey. So, and I also like the fact that the agreement itself doesn't bind us to supporting whatever FEMA comes out with based on the draft agreement. And I suspect that that was something that Tillamook and Umatilla insisted upon. But the staff capacity, your capacity, Toby, is the main thing that I'm concerned about. So I'm looking at Darren.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Ojo. And I know hopefully I think I'm echoing Toby's sentiments and appreciating your awareness of and consideration for staff capacity. So one thing that we've been working through is in conjunction with this, not really as part of this exercise, but we've been working through Toby's kind of overall workload to make sure we know how much time she has. We're still working through that. Couple of things. One is I'm really glad that it doesn't commit us to have to participate. It's on a voluntary basis. So that's one reassurance. The other thing I would say we didn't really mention, but this opens the door for Benton County cities to also work with us. And I think that's an important both opportunity, but also a capacity question, because it enables Toby perhaps to harness the interests and energies of folks at Corvallis or Philomath or Monroe or Adair Village. So I think we just have to see what it means in terms of workload. I've encouraged Toby and really all of our staff to be circumspect about how much we have to give to this project. And I think if we just stay in open communication, both internally and also with FEMA and with the other counties too, we give what we can to this project, contribute where we can. And I think that's all we can do, but we need to do something, and the opportunity is in front of us today.
Yeah, I think that in going back again to our Thriving Communities 2040 values and the values of the larger Benton County electorate, the goals that FEMA is trying to achieve align well with those. It's all about the how and how it lands, how it's funded, and how it works. So I think that it's important to, if we care about it, to help try and shape it. I also think that there's an opportunity, again, piggybacking on that discussion about the water quality roundtable that Daniel hosted, for our local nonprofit organizations to engage. And from what I understand from this process, we would be co-hosting with FEMA a couple of public meetings along the way. So I think there's, again, it seems to me an opportunity to build some capacity, not just within us, but as with our collaborators around water issues before we embark on a bigger, hairier water exercise sometime in the future.
So just dip one toe in.
Yeah. So, and yes, thank you, Darren. That was nicely said, and Zan as well, Commissioner Ojo, thank you. I think the primary role for Benton County in this process would be more of a conduit. I mean, so there's the co-hosting, right? So we're providing a venue for FEMA to provide information directly with targeted groups, and helping get that information out to those groups. And then there would also be opportunities for, technical expertise comments in response to the information being provided. But this is set up to be very flexible, and allow each of the cooperating agencies to participate as they're able. And I think we're working hard to make sure that we're keeping opportunities open.
Well, I really appreciate the efforts to get to this point, and I think it will serve us well to be at the table and have some of these discussions, especially with the community members. And I was very impressed with the draft IGA printed in red across every page that this is preliminary draft. There is no doubt that this is not the final product. So even I could tell that this is the start of the discussion, but I think it's an important one.
I have one question. Would you expect to bring a final agreement back to us, or should we just give you the authority to proceed?
Toby, do you have a sense for that? I know you've been in contact with Vance and he's not here this morning, but you want to just say where you think we are on that?
Sure. So Vance did review it. He had one item that he was not in agreement with, and it had to do with providing information, just like a blanket information provision. Unfortunately, I don't have access to the email right here where I'm at. But he said overall, he was fine with it. Just that there was just that one spot and it didn't look to be like it was an issue. That it would require a signature from somebody at the county. So if that signature requires another meeting through the board, we can set that up. I'm not exactly sure what the process is, so I would be happy to take any recommendations, and I'm happy to come back as many times as that would be helpful.
No, just that question of process, but I'm comfortable with it. I don't. I think that we may need to bring it back one final time if it needs the chair's signature. But yeah, I don't see a signature line on the draft agreement.
I think the way we've structured our relationship with FEMA currently is that the county administrator and or the floodplain administrator can sign these kinds of agreements. So it wouldn't have to come back to you, but we're certainly happy to bring it back if that helps you feel comfortable on it.
I'm fine either way. I don't feel it has to come back, but I might in my motion specify that the county administrator and the FEMA floodplain coordinator or you as the community development director have the authority to finalize the agreement.
I think that falls with either, in this case, Suzanne as the interim administrator or with Toby as the floodplain administrator.
Okay.
And I guess I would appreciate kind of updates where the process is at and what kind of timetable we're on for. This is the lengthy process, so just periodic updates where the process is at, I think would be helpful.
Well, it's not really fair to ask you because we don't quite know how this is going to unfold, but I presume that anytime something changes in the project, we should bring that back to you. And we've been trying to do that kind of on an ad hoc basis. Is that working well for the board?
Yeah, and I think there's a schedule that evolves in terms of I think there's a rough schedule that FEMA has in here, but it doesn't have dates associated with it. Once there's a schedule with dates, maybe we can take a look at that and take a look at what kind of update periods might be most reasonable.
Sounds good. And just in the vein of updates too. So as you know, we've been talking about a couple different projects over the years. Some of those are in the works. As Darren and I have been looking at my schedule and things like that, and the floodplain program as a whole and the water management project and stuff. One of the things that we've been working on is identifying kind of a regular update schedule. So that is coming just in terms of floodplain projects and what things are going on to help keep you guys informed.
Sounds great. Okay, I move to direct county staff to partner with FEMA as a cooperating agency during the National Environmental Policy Act review process for the National Flood Insurance Program Endangered Species Implementation in Oregon, And to make it clear, we are delegating authority to county administrator or interim county administrator and the floodplain administrator to sign off on the final cooperating agreement.
I will second the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. And thank you, especially thank you, Toby, for taking some time out to do a little business here. But I'm glad it's sunny in Seattle also. So,
Yeah. Well, you're welcome. And thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
all right. Next up, 8.2, initiation of proceedings to vacate a portion of North 20th Place, County Road number 26632. Joe Martis. Good morning.
Commissioners. With regards to the initiation of 20th Place, this is in the Philomath area. The petitioner is Glorietta Bay, and this is a relationship to a recreational park that they are planning on building, and they're kind of initiating the process right now. The vacation of 20th Place, the road, very end of the road has never been built to any standards. I don't even think there's a road there. Somebody's been driving across the grass or whatever. The location of the place based on the owner and of course going out on site, there's a railroad track where 19th Street crosses. That's where the access point to this property is. It's not a very safe location. They want to bring it down to the middle of the curve of 19th Street as a good sight distance both ways. And of course, they're have a main access building that will be inside this vacated area also. The plan is also based on the Exhibit B that's in your packet there. The city would like to retain the rights of the city for any future water and sewer lines, and also for the public utility. So the process would be like the westerly 48 feet of that would be reserved as an easement rights, not as a county road, of course. And that would at least make it a better location for their driveway. As you can see, the way the road comes at a bad angle onto 19th Street, because 19th Street was redone a long time ago. It was originally Green Road. Most people know the Philomath area. But the 20th Place was the main entryway in and out. There won't be any access to people's property delineated because of the vacation. Most of the property is further to the south off the main highway. And there would be no need to connect on 19th Street, which is just a bad spot. And Gloria Bay will create a nice driveway to be more radial to the curves so we can see out. And so it's been designed, and a lot of things are actually through the city of Philomath are in place for the development of the RV park, which is trails and more development of the sidewalks and some other things like that.
So we're just one step in their development process in order to make it clear that we don't have any interest in further developing road in that portion of the property.
Right, and it's up to the park to meet the county standards for city improvements. There is one law if we go to the final phase of the vacation phase that they will have to submit this to the city for their concurrence. And that means they have to give their blessing. It is inside the city limits, but it's still a county road. We still use the county road process for vacation, but I will submit all that information to the city of Philomath, kind of help them with the idea of what a concurrence is, because I've done them before. It's with the city of Corvallis.
It was a very thorough presentation in our packet, so always appreciate the maps and kind of explanation of what's going on, especially when it's in the city, but it's a county road, and we have a few of those, I think. But any other questions? Not about a motion.
Okay, I move to declare Benton County's intent that the proceedings be initiated to vacate a portion of North 20th Place County Road number 26632 pursuant to Oregon Revised Statute 368.326 to 368.341 as described in resolution number R 2023-020.
I'll second the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
You.
Appreciate the thoroughness of your report, Joe. Next up, item 8.3, Water Master Budget Request for the 2023-2025 biennium. Rick Krager.
Thanks, Commissioner Malone.
Again.
Again, thank you, Commissioner Malone. Once again, as I mentioned earlier, as part of our process coming back to you today, this one's a little bit more straightforward than the last one. Specifically, a request for $5,000 per year or $10,000 for the biennium for a grant, or I should say more of an intergovernmental agreement with Oregon Water Resources Department for support as it relates to the water master position. I think in your packet is outlined, this is actually a memo that goes back to January 24th where they initially had submitted, but we did tell them that we would be putting this as part of our budget, which again, as I said before, is actually in our budget, but it's part of our process. Once we got into the actual execution, we would go in front of the board to approve. So just real quickly, as outlined in the memo, the District 22 has one water master that covers Polk, Bennett, and Yamhill County. Primarily, the purpose for this is for inspections to evaluate some of the general conditions of the different infrastructure and also to be able to deal with complaints that may come through. These dollars, as outlined in the memo, are really, again, important for the entire support of that position, but in particular, they mention the spring and summer months when there is a lot more complaints and a need for evaluation. So this would really help support that temporary assistance need. Again, commissioners, this is I think a budget that you've had in place for some time. I'm assuming, and I believe that both other counties also contribute to this. I will want to just make sure that there is an intergovernmental agreement put in place, but with this particular type of contribution, it's really more of just outlining, here's our expectations, what it's for. Usually with the state organization, it's more straightforward as it relates. So again, pretty straightforward, $10,000 grant. With your approval, we would move forward with establishing the appropriate documentation and initiate a payment with probably, as I say, back-end accountability.
And you mentioned the figure $10,000, but it's $5,000 per year. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's the same amount that we've done in the past.
Did not change. I budgeted actually a little higher than that because, as you know, we put inflationary marks. So that's a little bit of savings for us. $550, but certainly we'll take whatever we can get. I guess $10,000.
I appreciate the fact that our water master, Joel Plun, has come and reported to us in the winter each year about how the previous irrigation season has gone. It's much easier for him to present full information when they have this extra support working in the field here in Benton County. It allows us to be much more responsive to local folks. So I'm cutting in and out. No? Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to see this moving forward and happy to make a motion. I move to approve $10,000 over 2 years to the Oregon Water Resources Department for assistance to our water master for additional personnel support.
I'll second the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners, and we'll get started getting an agreement put in place. Thanks.
It's a very good year to talk about water. Next up, 8.4 intergovernment agreement for placement of Benton County juveniles in the Benton Juvenile Detention Center. Matt Weatherall.
Morning, commissioners.
Good morning.
Okay, so this is a yearly IGA that we have with Lynn County for the Lynn Benton Juvenile Detention Center. As you can see on the last page, there has been a little bit of an increase over 23-24, just about $24,000. Well, 25, we'll just round it up, $25,000. I work very closely with the Lynn County Juvenile Department Director in coming up with the numbers that you see before you.
Okay. I'm assuming this is a longstanding agreement and it's working well for both parties. And
it is. This agreement's been in place since the detention center was built back in the 90s. We've always rented a number of beds from the detention center. That number has fluctuated. I believe it originally started at 8 or 9 beds and of course is reduced over time. But currently the 4 beds is what we rent on an annual basis from them. And it works very well. As I always have, most of the time, even if I am at capacity of 4 beds, I do have a bed available if I need one. Of course, that's putting youth in detention as our last resort. But the agreement works well.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate that this has also become more of a tri-county resource that Lincoln County has joined in as well. Grateful for the collaboration of our sister counties. I don't have any further questions.
no,
Okay, I move to approve and sign the intergovernmental agreement between Lynn County and Benton County that provides for placement of Benton County juveniles in the Lynn Benton Juvenile Detention Center for the period July 1, 2023 through June 30, 2024.
I'll second the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you, commissioners.
Very efficient, Matt.
I try to be efficient.
All right. Our next item is, do we have any other business for the good of the county? Hearing none, I will now recess the regular board meeting and enter into executive session under ORS 192.6602A, employment of a public officer.